Hello everybody, I'm Roxy and this is Chaotic Bibliophile. So I'm trying a new framing today, still very chaotic. I do kind of want to show up the ever-growing stacks, plus this postcard of Marilyn Monroe eating, which gives me life. I don't know, what do you think? Do you like this? Please let me know. Anyways, today I am here with 6 book reviews, or my wrap-up of the first round of the Booktube prize. If you don't know what the Booktube prize is, I'm going to link the official channel and the quarterfinals announcement, which I have not seen. I have managed to avoid all spoilers, so I do not know which books made it, but basically how it works is that you sign up to be a judge and you get 6 books to read. I signed up for both fiction in translation and nonfiction, and I ended up being chosen for nonfiction. I had Group E, one of my favorites. I finally got to so many books I wanted to get to in the first place, but also I got to one book specifically that I didn't even know existed, but I loved, so I am so pleased. And then you rank them from 6 to first being the one that you like the most, and the system calculates, let's say, which 3 make it to the next round, and that is how it works. So for my wrap-up, I am going to review the books from my least favorite to my most favorite, although that is a poor choice of words. I'll explain in a second, and then I'll see what books made it to the next round. I won't be signed up, or actually didn't sign up already, for the quarterfinals. I am going to try to sign up for the semifinals, although it's looking a bit slim. However, definitely, if they still need judges, I'll do the finals because of timing, basically. At that point, I should already have handed in my dissertation for my master's. Exciting. Cannot believe it. It's gone by so fast. And so, yeah, I love participating in the Booktube Prize, and possibly next year I'm going to do all the rounds. We'll see. So, the reason I said saying from my least favorite to my most favorite was inaccurate is because what I strive for here is a balance. Of course, I do feel the subject matter and my personal enjoyment of the book does affect how I see the book. But in general, especially with nonfiction, I think it's much easier to judge what the book set out to do and what it accomplished, and finding a balance between theme and how the theme is approached and explored, and how the writing works, and how those two get together to produce something that is objectively good or enjoyable for what it tried to do. Now, of course, it is not a perfect system, and of course, there's always going to be a point of subjectivity in it. It's still my judgment. Let's start. So number 6 is my biggest disappointment, one book that I almost bought on my hardback sale binge sort of thing. I leave that book haul down below. I ended up not, because I thought I wouldn't get to it very quickly, but in the end I had to order it either way, and I bought it with so much faith. I thought I was going to love it, but this book is The Sinner and the Saint, Dostoevsky, A Crime and Its Punishment by Kevin Birmingham. This is sold as an account of the creation of Crime and Punishment, Dostoevsky's, well, we can call it magnum opus, but I do feel like a lot of people say, oh, The Idiot is better, or oh, The Brothers Karamazov is better, but certainly one of his major works. And its connection with a French murderer called Lanciel, I think. I have heard the name pronounced so, yeah, Lacenaire. François Lacenaire. Apologies to anyone who speaks a drop of French. I think this has amazing writing, by the way. I think it is so riveting. That's why at the beginning I was like, this is amazing. I am so on board. Yes, even though I haven't read Crime and Punishment yet, I have read some Dostoevsky and I really like his writing. So I was so on board. But then it starts to fall apart because although, yes, Dostoevsky was interested in Lacenaire, it's not that important. I mean, he was an influence, but it's not like Dostoevsky followed Lacenaire super closely. This has alternating chapters at some points. The central premise doesn't sustain itself throughout the book. And it felt while I was reading it that Kevin Birmingham thought, oh, this is a cool detail. Like, Lasseter is so fascinating. Let me see how it connects to Crime and Punishment. And that is exactly what happened. He read about this small detail in a Dostoevsky biography, and he immediately wanted to know more. So if this book had been shorter and focused exclusively on that, it would be okay. But then it also becomes close reading of the text and what the text has to say about crime and the ethics of crime and sort of the different aspects of crime. It also goes into gambling and Dostoevsky's own experience with gambling and debt. And it also goes into the dictation process, which sort of transformed how Dostoevsky wrote and his relationship with his second wife, or the woman who would become his second wife, who was a woman who started working as his secretary. He suffered from epilepsy and he could no longer write as much as he wanted to, and so he ended up dictating a lot of his major work to this woman. And of course she commented on it. The mere idea of having to sort of think and kind of perform the text before committing it to paper transformed the text. That analysis is brilliant, but it doesn't tie in with the rest of the book. It's just, there is so much going on in here and it doesn't come together, I feel like. And the other thing that really bothered me is that this is not scholarly, right? It's sort of in between. With that in mind, the use of quotations and sources, I didn't like. There was a lot of, oh, he said, she said, but there was no allusion to, was this found in a letter? Was this found in a diary? How did you know this is how Dostoevsky felt? Probably diaries, but the fact that I don't remember means that it was not stressed very much. And this is me not even being sure if it was mentioned. Where are you getting this information, Kevin? And of course, I'm not expecting in-text citations the way that you would find in an academic book or a paper, but I have seen other books do this well for the general public, and I honestly feel this wasn't it. So I'm sorry, this took the 6th place. The next book was also sort of a disappointment just because I was so excited to read it, and this is Beloved Beasts by Michel Nijhuis, or Nijhuis. I'm sorry, Michelle, for mispronouncing your last name. I hope I got it right at least once. Let's call it a collection of essays because I don't know how else to categorize it. All about conservation, its history, and its state at the moment. This was super informative. I did learn a lot, especially as someone who doesn't know a lot about the history of conservation. However, the way the information is presented, I thought was so dry. I really didn't enjoy the reading experience at all. And my problem with the book itself is that I wasn't sure whether this wanted to be a collection of essays, in which case each chapter doesn't really work because it doesn't have an interesting argument or even an interesting way of presenting the information other than as information, which is just very uninspired for a book, in my opinion. Or if it wanted to be a book in itself, in which case it just doesn't have a center other than conservation. But conservation is such a big topic, an idea, and it seemed to me that there was no point being made other than conservation is a thing, has been a thing, is tricky. I don't know. I don't remember a lot of the takeaways from this book. I'm not sure what I'm supposed to be taking away from this book. I mean, if I think about it for a second, of course I do know because it's about conservation. But compared to, for example, a single Jonathan Franzen essay that I read, and I talked about that essay collection in my February wrap-up, which I will link down below, I got so much more of that intellectually than from this book. And again, this book is very much historically driven, and that is okay. But if you're going to tell then the story of conservation, I think there are more interesting ways of telling that story, or it could have been crafted in a way that, I don't know, had a bit more spark. So basically for me here, it was the writing. I think definitely was the writing, but also this tension between being an essay collection, which I have heard this described as, or a whole book. And that does have an impact on how the book is written and how each section is written. And it does this thing that really, really annoys me. In an attempt to make it more cohesive, at the end of each chapter, it sort of ties the previous chapter to the next one, but the way it does it is through one or two sentences that are clearly sort of tacked on. It's so inorganic. And though I wasn't looking for them, I found a couple of reviews that said, oh yeah, a lot of cohesion between essays. And I couldn't shake my head hard enough because it's not the same. Internal cohesion is not determined by just two haphazard sentences. I put it above The Sinner and the Saint because I think the information here is very valuable and it's better sourced and better organized. But overall, not a book that I would recommend. The next book, I really love how it was written, but I also thought it needed more direction, which now I'm noticing is very important for me in nonfiction books, apparently. If it's well done, it's well done. Anyways, Ghost in the Throat by Doireann Ghríofa. Doireann Ghríofa is an Irish poet who I've read and have really liked. This is a memoir, although interestingly, it gets shelved in the fiction section a lot. I would say this is definitely a memoir. It is not autofictional. It does read a lot like fiction in the sense that it's very poetic because she's a poet, but compared to other books that are in that same line, like The Argonauts, for example, I definitely think this falls into the category of memoir. This is sold as Doireann Ghríofa's exploration into a poet that she really likes, an Irish poet. This very popular at the moment, finding an author you connect with and using their experiences to frame your own and find that connection through time and have it as a starting point for all these reflections on art and life, etc. I am going to go turn on the light because it's getting dark. Okay, I'm back. And there is definitely a lot of that, but it is also a memoir about motherhood and the experience, very corporeal and very emotional, of motherhood. And both those things are great, but they are not connected. They never come together. There is nothing really in the explorations of the poet that inform, in my opinion, her experiences of motherhood in a way that for me as a reader feels relevant. Of course, because she loves this poet, it will affect her and it will be relevant to her. But as a reader, that doesn't have any bearing on me. That sounds so cold and I apologize. I don't mean it in a rude way. Hey guys, this is Roxy from the future. One thing that I forgot to mention, Doireann Ghríofa is also translating the poet's poetry. So that is another way of approaching the text. There is a correlation there with something that she keeps bringing up, which is this is a female text and the female line between her own motherhood and the poet's writing and different acts of creation, and of course Doireann Ghríofa being a poet. So I do think that those themes are related. And I have already started editing this video, which is why I am highlighting that I keep mentioning that the two parts feel very disjointed, and they do. But there is that kind of connection, and also the idea of translating and reading intimately, almost bodily, I think is very important. So I just didn't want to not bring it up. Back to the past. You are writing a book about this, right? So I feel like there should be a stronger connection there. Again, when you are tying together so many disparate elements, it's hard to do. I understand. That is the task you set yourself. And to be honest, I also don't think she illuminates too much about the poet herself. I definitely was not interested, was not compelled to check her out. And I am a very easy to influence reader. If you talk about a book full of things that I hate, but you make it sound good to me, I will go and read that shit. So for me, it felt very unnecessary and self-indulgent in that respect. She has these very interesting passages where she talks about going to find these letters or almost giving up. And if the reflections were focused on that, what does that feel rather than, oh, okay, and then the letters led me to think this about the poet, I think it would have been more successful. But then again, I don't know how that connects to motherhood, maybe like different experiences. So I just felt it was very disconnected. However, as I said, the writing is beautiful, and there are so many passages that I just loved how she described things so successfully and so beautifully in a way that even if I hadn't experienced them myself, I went, yes, okay, I understand what you're trying to say. And I think that's very valuable. I don't think I would reread this again. Sadly, I couldn't get my hands on a secondhand copy. I would definitely revisit some of the paragraphs. As it is, I cannot see myself going back to the ebook, but you never know. Now, onto the books that did make it, at least with my ranking. We have Facing the Mountain by, Daniel James Brown. And this is the World War II book that of course could not be absent because Americans love their World War II books. And I know there are many Booktube Prize judges, myself included, who are not American, but if we see the evidence, clearly there is something going on. I am so done reading World War II books. But if I was going to read a World War II book, I would love it if it would be something like Facing the Mountain, which is a story of the Japanese Americans who fought in World War II and also of the internment camps where they sent a lot of these soldiers and the aftermath of that atrocity that was committed. In terms of information, I learned so much. I think it is amazing that this story is finally gaining a lot of attention because it is a passage of American history that until a few years ago was not very discussed at all, basically. A lot of people didn't even know that this happened. I thought this book was great. I found that it did that thing that war books do, that it is very dry to me, but I know people like it, where they just describe the battlefield and the campaigns and the stuff leading up to it. I'm just not into it, but I can recognize that it's well done, and if someone reads war books, which I know a lot of people do, they will enjoy this one. Therefore is number 3. That said, I don't think it offered anything different from that. It is told very much in the key of war books, but with a fresh story. And so if you know someone in your life who reads these sort of books, but maybe would not pick this up on account that it's not about Churchill, for example, give them this one because it is well worth it. And for a war book, I enjoyed it. Let's just say. It also relied a lot on networks of primary sources, meaning he interviewed a lot of the descendants or a lot of the people he could access that went through this and were still alive. And so it's just a really good job of research and book writing, and it was good. That was Facing the Mountain. Now on to the first 2, which are books that I genuinely loved. For number 2, I picked The Codebreaker by Walter Isaacson. Now, the reason I don't have a physical copy of this is because I really wanted to find a second-hand copy because I know I can and I know that I will eventually. That is the fate of a lot of Walter Isaacson's books because people read them and a lot of people don't revisit them, and I want a second-hand copy. If I find a second-hand paperback copy, I think I would get it because I would want to reread this. That already gives you an idea. This is the story of Jennifer Doudna, who is one of the leading researchers in the gene editing field that actually helped develop COVID vaccines. Very interesting stuff. But before we get into more of the context of the books, I do want to talk a little bit about the structure because Walter Isaacson is known as a biographer, and this is packaged in that way, but it's not really. It does go into Jennifer Doudna's biographical details very briefly, but it's not the same as, for example, Steve Jobs, where he was such an overpowering central figure and so much of an enigma. I haven't read that book yet, but I imagine because of the films and because of everything, what everyone's interested in, sort of how he became the genius, right? All of that is very much glossed over in The Codebreaker. And then it's definitely not like Leonardo or Albert Einstein, where you really, really want all the deeds. And also, they are dead and have been dead for a long time. The relationship with the subject matter is entirely different. But also because this is not really about her, this is about her in the same way that any documentary about a topic will pick a few key players and center them as a starting point to explain the rest of the story, if that makes sense. So it does take her as a starting point, but it's much more about gene editing itself, the development of the field, the establishing of the field, the players in the field. So I think what it resembles most is actually a journalistic investigation / science writing, deep dive into the technology and the development of the technology through the key players. So I do have a bit of gripe in the way this was packaged and sold. That said, I was so riveted. I just think Walter Isaacson writes so well and excitingly. I couldn't stop reading it. It has chapters that are not that short objectively, but are short enough to feel even shorter because the writing is so good and you just want to keep reading. The way he builds tension and he talks about the feuds, but also is very professional. He knows his people, he goes to interview them, he's seen them at work, and there are so many touchy politics regarding scientific research. And he does go into that as well, by the way, but it's all the more remarkable because he's implicated in them. He has to ask questions and he has to get into these feuds. And the other people know that he's working on a book about, for example, the rival and sort of how he handles that. And the fact that he chose to not center the story on himself, but still insert himself when necessary and not avoid the thorny, ethical, and conflict of interesty situations, I admire so profoundly. Honestly, Walter Isaacson is amazing. I really admire him and I want to read all the books he wrote, even the ones about subjects that I don't care, because I think he's just that good of a writer. I think this is a book that will not appeal to everyone because it does, again, go into the details of the technology and some people will just be bored by that. But if you're like me and you don't know a lot about it, I knew honestly basically nothing, this is a great source. And it's just a riveting read and a riveting look into the science field today and scientific research and how it works and the business side of it and the tech side and the venture capitalist side is just so interesting. Yes, some of the things could have been better developed, but again, it's because it's a book that is so in the now that I think it dealt with the topics as well as it could have. That said, I don't know how this book will read in 5 or 10 years from now. And I think that is a bit of a shortcoming. And maybe in regards to that, I should have ranked it 3rd, not 2nd, because Facing the Mountain, I think, won't have that same problem. But I just thought the writing was so good. And you know me, I am a sucker for great writing. Okay, and number 1, biggest surprise, book that I didn't even know existed. One of the best books that I've read so far this year in the nonfiction category. I'm obsessed. I think back to it all the time. The Doctor's Blackwell by Janice P. Nimura. So if you're wondering why I have a physical copy of this book I'd never heard of, it's because I couldn't find an e-copy of it. And I'm so glad because that made me order it and now I own it. Which, by the way, I don't know if I'm keeping The Sinner and the Saint, but I'm definitely keeping and revisiting this one. The subtitle for this one is How Two Pioneering Sisters Brought Medicine to Women and Women to Medicine. It is a biography of these 2 women who I didn't know anything about before reading this book that helped open colleges, because US, for women to study medicine, and also founded a lot of hospitals and wards and a college themselves even, some of which are still in operation, albeit transformed, and basically are the main reason women could access medicine. And what is so fascinating is that they have been championed and memorialized in history, and that is the opening of the book, the author being at an inauguration of, I don't remember if it was a building or a statue, but it was a commemoration of both sisters. And the author talks about how they are made to have been almost saintly and kind and warm, or as having been super feminist and radical and neither of those things are true. And so in a way, this is a revisionist project. She wants to uncover the real Doctors Blackwell, quote unquote. That is a challenge because although they were very important at the time, they weren't celebrities. So she does have to go through a lot of different sources in order to piece together these two lives. But also she doesn't want to discredit everything that they did. But the truth was, they weren't really nice people, and that is okay. They did a lot of good, and they didn't really do a lot of bad, but their politics were very regressive. They fell into this "I'm not like other girls" trope. I completely understand why it's a thing. I'm happy we're waking up to it, but I think it's logical to feel like you must not be a normal woman if you've been raised to believe that womanhood is one thing, but you find yourself not aligning with that, and you want to pursue medicine, and you feel your characters is more stern, it's more this and that. And I'm not saying it excuses it, I just think it explains it. Oftentimes they felt like most women didn't have what it took, but still they fought for the inclusion of women, and they sort of called them to be on par with the men, which again is very problematic now, but it was groundbreaking at that time. And so this profiling that Nimura does of the sisters as fully fledged humans is just so compelling. The writing is so good. I found it both really readable, perhaps not as riveting as Isaacson's, but very, very fascinating and humorous. I laugh out loud several times. The way Nimura just sort of sneaks in a joke feels like I was sitting in a lecture theater listening to her talk about these sisters, and she cracked a joke and we all went, huh, and then she continued. And I thought that was great. Finally, I think the use of primary sources is astonishing, especially considering there were not as many of them. And the way she managed to credit everything and also spot the blind spots and acknowledge them and build on them, and didn't take any attributions but still created a really, really fully fledged profile, I think was great. Not as important, but I just really like how the book feels in my hand. I like the inclusion of pictures. I just thought it all worked really, really well. And I am so happy that the Booktube Prize brought this to my attention, because I really, really enjoyed it. And I don't know if it will effectively make my top 10 nonfiction books, because I haven't read a lot of nonfiction yet, but I am planning to change that. So we'll have to see. But as it stands, I really enjoy this book. I really recommend it, especially if you enjoy biographies, if you enjoy women's history. This is a really good one to pick up. And it's actually also very short because, of course, a lot of it is notes. It sort of ends here. Well, I do read the acknowledgements, so I would say here. And that is it. Those are my rankings and my reviews, and now I'm going to check what made it through. Oh, okay. So the 3 books that made it were A Ghost in the Throat, Facing the Mountain, and The Doctors Blackwell. I am not surprised about A Ghost in the Throat just because it has been so popular. I think a lot of people take it because the writing is so strong. So fair enough. Facing the Mountain, I was expecting 100%. I am completely fine with it making the rounds. I advanced it as well, but I am especially pleased that The Doctors Blackwell made it. I was not expecting that, actually. I thought people might not like it because it's a bit of a niche subject. I don't know, for example, Beloved Beasts has quite good reviews, so I'm actually quite happy with this. Now I'm going to go watch the rest of the selection because I have not done that. I didn't want to get spoiled. Please let me know if you've read any of these books, what you thought about them. Are you participating in the Booktube Prize in any capacity? Please let me know. If you've judged anything, also please let me know and I will go watch your reviews. Or if you don't make videos with your reviews, tell me something that stood out to you from what you judged. You know, all comments can go down below, and please like and subscribe, share, etc., etc. See you next time. Okay, but am I bitter that Nervous System, The Twilight Zone by Nona Fernandez, which I haven't read yet, but I really want to, didn't make it? Yes, you bet your ass I am bitter. At least How to Order the Universe by Maria Jose Ferrada made it. I also haven't read that one, but I also really want to. Okay, but Do we think Empire of Pain is going to win? I don't know. Say Nothing won, and Empire of Pain, I haven't finished it yet because now I have a physical copy, but it feels like it's going to win. Crying in Judgement, also a strong contender. It is so noisy outside. I apologize, even though I cannot really do anything about it. Anyways,